Hey everyone, welcome to the ATDev Podcast. So happy to be joined today by V Nguyễn, the occupational clinical researcher at Hello Robot. Hey V, how are you today?
Owen, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you for being here. Yeah, so to start, would you mind giving a brief intro on yourself and your background and the amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah. So my name is V, and thanks again, Owen, for having me on your podcast. I am an occupational therapist. I currently work at Hello Robot, which is actually a company based in Martinez, California. Through and through, it's a robotic company. At the moment, I'm the only clinician at the company. But I hope through this interdisciplinary work that the company is fostering, that will change. And over time, more clinicians will be in the space of robotics. And that's certainly something I want to see clinicians being in these non-traditional spaces and technology. My role over at Hello Robot is leading the assistive robotics initiatives. I co-lead it with a very close robotic engineer at Hello Robot. Her name is Dr. Vinitha Ranganeni, and so she's the engineering side of the work that I do. And yeah, so that's a bit about me.
That's amazing, and I really love your what you said about interdisciplinary because I think that's really a gap in a lot of robotics right now is that any innovation that happens doesn't really mean anything if it isn't implemented in a meaningful way. And I think occupational therapy is really that's what it's all about, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I'm actually curious. Oh, and a lot of people don't know what occupational therapy is or what occupational therapists do. And so I'm very curious. Do you have any experience with occupational therapy? Are you familiar with our field?
Yeah, I am. I've worked with occupational therapists my whole life, really. I have a type of muscular dystrophy, and so I've been using a wheelchair since 4 or 5, I think. And yeah, occupational therapists are obviously a big part of that story and helping people get the durable medical equipment that they need. And yeah, I think occupational therapy has really shaped a lot of my views on assistive technology.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's always nice to know a person that is an advocate for our field. And I'm happy that occupational therapy has benefited you in your daily life.
Yeah, yeah, it sure has. So I'm curious, yeah, what drew you to occupational therapy?
Yeah, that's a very interesting story. I'm certainly there's that term when you go to school. Is it non-traditional student, I believe, right? Where you're
Yeah,
a lot older when you go to school. So I went through my undergrad. I went to San Jose State University. I graduated in child and adolescent development with a minor in atypical child studies. At the time, I actually wanted to be a social worker. And then I
yeah,
became on a track in occupational therapy when I later found out about the profession. But I've done so many things. I've dabbled a lot of things, but the core of everything I've ever done has always been related to people and providing access to the individuals to different resources. And I think what shaped me in my journey of going into OT was actually my childhood. So when I was 5 years old, my first childhood friend was a neighbor of mine living with cerebral palsy. His name was Jake. Now, as a 5-year-old, I didn't know what cerebral palsy was. And I'm so grateful that my parents never put a label on him, which people tend to do when someone looks quote unquote different. And to
right.
me, wow, Jake was the fastest kid on the block, zooming in his power wheelchair, and communicated with a device that had all these fun emoji-like labels on them, different characters, like our cartoon characters, essentially. That device is what we know today as augmentative and alternative communication, C
Yeah.
devices. And but back then I had no idea, right? I just thought, wow, this guy has such cool technology. I'm so happy to be his friend. And whenever my dad washed his car outside our house, Jake would zoom over and I'd ride on the back of his wheelchair. It was a
Yeah.
blast and a fond memory I cherish to this day. And I share that because my journey into assistive and robotic technologies and even occupational therapy was not linear. And having befriended Jake and then being actively involved with individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities to youth in the foster care system, I carry a deep passion to tackle disparities and provide access to populations that are historically underrepresented and underserved.
Yeah.
And I discovered occupational therapy while I was a social work major at San Jose State University in California. Like I mentioned, I did switch and I ended up graduating with a degree in child and adolescent development. But at the time, that was my track. And so I was working at a nonprofit called Hope Services. And at the time, I was leading a pilot after school program for teens and young adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities, such as autism, Asperger's, Down syndrome. And there was one participant who had a compulsion to forcibly grab people's arms and yank them, especially
Yeah.
when they were in a heightened and overstimulated state. And you can imagine how dangerous this behavior could be. Now, I'm 5'4" on a good day, and the participant had at least 4 to 5 inches over me and was very strong. So I began to problem solve, right? I didn't want him pulling people's arms. And so I went out to the hardware store. I purchased a PVC pipe, roughly the length of a human arm, and encased it with very thick foam padding for safety. And so whenever I saw that participant go out to grab an arm or my arm, I quickly would hand him my PVC foam arm invention that I created. And
Yes.
to my amazement, it worked, right? He would squeeze it so deeply, like he was juicing oranges, twisting his hands against the foam. And it basically became a fidget toy that calmed him down and relaxed him. So that
Yeah.
was my journey within like finding simple materials and building something to create problems. And I had encountered somebody who worked at Hope Services, and they saw my invention and asked if I knew about OT because apparently OT does similar things like this, adapting equipment, assessing environment, really understanding the person and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
And so I looked up OT and I was, wow, amazed that in a world where there's just so much judgment, criticism, and belief that one can't do something, especially if they're facing a disability. OT was a field that believes that people can do the things they want to do. And that as a therapist, we champion their goals and desire to live their life fully. And recognizing that people have the right to do the activities that are meaningful to them. You have every right, Owen, to do everything that's meaningful to you, just as I do. But at times, people may feel very limited, either due to being born with a certain condition or developing a condition or injury over time that limits them to perform at their best. So, as an OT, being that champion to see possibility and meeting the person where they're at and walking alongside them to empower their ability to do what they can achieve was right up my alley. So, that's really my journey in terms of how I got into OT and through my travels, seeing so much disparity in the world and having grown up in Silicon Valley, seeing so much technology out there, but also recognizing it's not always accessible. How do I change that?
Yeah.
Got me into the space of technology when I started OT school.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. And yeah, really cool story. I think that really grounds what occupational therapy is and what it can do and how it really helps people move from a world that is inaccessible to them to a world that is more accessible. And I think that's, really for me, I think a big focus of what occupational therapy means. And yeah, really cool. And you mentioned a little bit about robotics, and there are not a lot of occupational therapists working in robotics, although I think there should be. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience is like, and how does your clinical lens shape the way that you think about robot design, and how does that work across a highly technical team?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I have a question for you before I answer your
Yeah.
question, if that's okay. You
Yeah,
had
of course.
mentioned that you certainly feel OT should be more in these spaces. in robotics, for example. Can you elaborate
Yeah.
on that, on your perception of why that is?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing is that there a lot of technologists, I think, work in a silo and they make technology for technology's sake. Do a lot of outreach to people and end users. I think this is true definitely in the assistive device space, but it's also true more largely. I think that human-centered design isn't something that has been emphasized in engineering schools, although I think that's changing. Really, you need to talk to your end users and really understand the problem you're solving is and adopt a technology to fix that problem rather than just building technology for technology's sake. And I think occupational therapy has a lot of emphasis on the human factors of problem solving.
Yeah, those are really good points. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Owen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as an OT, how does that change the way I think about robot design development compared to an engineer? I want to pose a question for you. Have you ever heard of the term solutioneering?
I don't think so.
Okay, I just learned about it. It's amazing. It relates to this concept where a solution is created for a problem that is not fully understood. Now, before I
Mm,
knew this term, it was something that Dr. Vinitha Ranganeni, my colleague, had described to me. She had been in the field of robotics for over a decade. She's also a female roboticist and has been a big champion for OT collaboration with engineers. Now, the concept of solutioneering was that engineers have this tendency to create a solution to a vaguely understood problem. Now, these solutions are generally very high tech, super impressive. But after they build something super clever and shiny, engineers will then proceed to find someone that needs that exact tech. And to your point about interviewing users, those missing parts are not quite there when they're building that
right.
technology. So then again, they're solutioneering, but not getting deep into the grit of what the whole entire problem is that the person has. Therefore, the product can end up in a state of limbo, and then they have lots of gaps they'll have to fill in. And it didn't quite solve a particular problem. And so, this concept of that and how we can shift that with actually having clinicians be part of that team, as well as end users, is that instead of tech first, problem later, as an OT, we'll uncover what problem areas exist now and present a solution that supports the person in overcoming those problems. And I think that's the beauty of at least being at Hello Robot, where I can work hand in hand with engineers, right? I can actually bring the robot in real world environments with real people and really get their perception on how this robot could work for them. And
Yeah.
as an OT, and everyone that I've ever met who has wanted to use the stretch robot, which right now is still within the research scope, but one day we do hope, as we're working hard towards it, that it will be deployed in real people's homes. Specifically, people at the moment, our focus has been people with severe motor impairments, so paralyzed
Mhm.
from the neck down, or don't have use of their arms and hands. And we're working towards that goal. But when I meet that population, I generally don't even introduce the robot. I first focus on that individual first, right? I want to understand the big picture of the person. Do they have
Yeah.
a family? What type of home do they live in? Do they use a wheelchair? What kind? Power or manual assist? Do they have adaptations in their home? What kind of doorknobs do they have? How much care do they receive? What are their pain points? What do they want to do more independently that they can't do now?
Yeah.
So understanding that big picture, what OTs call the occupational profile, allows me to better understand how the robot can work for that individual. And that's usually the approach that I will take. So there's no bias to that process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I think, yeah, it's so relevant. It's, I think, a lesson that can be applied across all types of engineering, not just in assistive field. So that's a really interesting perspective.
Thank you. And
Um,
uh,
yeah. Oh yeah, go
go ahead,
ahead.
Owen. I was gonna add that with for you example, Owen, you have your own company, right? And I certainly also believe in addition to working interdisciplinary across fields, that it also includes other companies that are in this assistive space, such as yourself, and such as other companies that could really support this technology to better help the individual. For example, I've recently connected with a company called Ollie Tech, and they
Oh
have
yeah,
been, are you familiar with Ollie Tech, Owen?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. How
I've just seen some of their stuff on the internet, but I it'd be great if we could give some background for our listeners.
For sure. Yeah. So Ollie Tech was created by an individual named Spiro. He's out in California. He developed ALS and was on a journey to create a device that he could use hands-free due to ALS progressively impacting the functional use of his limbs and his voice and other aspects of his body. And so he was able to self-fund the company and hire different engineers to work on this product called Cato. And so Cato uses it's a Bluetooth device, and you can basically hook it on your ear. You can even attach it on your forehead if you like. There's so many different attachment points that you
Hmm.
could use with Cato. And I had seen that the people that I'd worked with have also used different assistive input devices. And we had them use those input devices to control stretch. But sometimes those input devices didn't work very well. And so with this collaboration with Cato, I was able to connect with the team at Ollie Tech, including Spiro, Finn, and one particular person that I've been really close with, Alan Cantwell. And so he's an expert of Cato. And so he's been actually really collaborating with us to send out Cato devices to very specific stakeholders that I've been working with to not only provide them greater access to stretch, but more the bigger picture is that they can use it to operate their phones or computer. And some folks don't have a really good way to control their phone in bed. And so we're testing
Yeah,
ways that Cato can be used for all purposes of their life. And so that's also a perception that with OT, right? Yes, I work with stretch. Yes, I work in robotics. But in order for the technology to work well for you, we have to think about all the aspects in which you're going to use that technology for. And that also
yeah,
includes your input devices. Otherwise, it's just not a good experience. And we have to fill those gaps. And certainly clinicians have that lens to really support that.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. And I have had a problem accessing my phone from bed for years, and it was only in the last few years where I was able to find a solution using a joystick from this small company. It's really just one person, Celtic Magic from the UK. The developer's name is Graham Law, and they make a really lightweight joystick. I use all my technology with my lips and my joystick. That's how I use it. And this joystick it takes under 5 grams to move it. And so it's super lightweight and really easy to use with your mouse or your face. And it's really cool to see people that are end users of technology developing things. And I think that really that's what drives innovation, right? It's really finding a need and then addressing it.
Definitely, yeah. And supporting each other, right? I think we're in such a competitive culture that it also overshadows all the possibilities that we can really create together. If our goal is accessibility, if our goal is to empower people, working together creates waves that we otherwise really couldn't create on our own. And so I'm a firm
Yeah,
believer in, and I'm very grateful for organizations that do care about collaboration and have a real focus to help people in the end of it all. Could you repeat that
yeah.
company you said, Owen? I didn't catch it completely.
Oh yeah, Celtic Magic.
Okay, Celtic Magic. Cool. Thanks for
Yeah, they make it's mostly for adaptive gaming, but you can update the firmware to have it act as like a mouse or something. So yeah, they do really cool stuff. And it's relatively affordable on the assistive technology spectrum, which is not very affordable generally. So yeah, yeah, awesome, V. This has been so wonderful, and I always feel like I learned something from you every time we chat. So yeah, thank you for your time. And if people want to learn more about you or Hello Robot, where can they go to find more information?
Our website's a good start. So hello-robot.com if you want to learn more about our robot Stretch, which by the way is a mobile manipulator, which essentially is a mobile robot on a base with an arm. And so it has different end effector points, such as a gripper. You can switch it out for a tablet. So different tools can be set on there. But feel free to check us out on our website. And if you want to connect with me directly, feel free to reach out over LinkedIn. I am connected to Owen, so definitely connect to him and then you'll find me along the way. Really appreciate the time, Owen.
Awesome. Yeah, same V. And thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend or family member. And until next time, thanks, everybody.